Now, on to the interaction with the panel. Alam niyo po, busy yung chat box kanina sa mga questions, no, for RD Popop and Asakyo. Shall we share or show the first slide, please? Aubrey, first slide. The first slide ay questions for RD Cariño. Pero pwede rin namang magdagdag si Asakyo kung gusto niya, no? So, ang question po ay, how far have efforts to reduce poverty in Mindanao succeeded? Sinabi na naman po kanina na yun pa rin, no? Land of plenty and pero land of poverty pa rin. But how much has poverty been reduced specifically under a Mindanaoan president? And specifically, do we have less provinces in the poorest list compared to 6 years ago? And dinagdagan po ito, siguro mas direct nakatutok lang sa BARM. Given nga na sinabi, mataas yung economic growth for BARM, pero why does poverty persist? Bakit mataas pa rin daw po? RD Popop?
Thank you for the question, Ms. Mags. As I have reported ganina in my presentation, all the Mindanao regions actually registered reduction in poverty rates when we compared the data for 2015 and the full year 2018 estimates which were released in 2019. Now, among all the regions in Mindanao, Region 10 had the most substantial reduction in poverty at 15.6 percentage points. But among all the Mindanao regions, it's Davao region which has the lowest poverty incidence at 19.1%. So while the poverty incidences in regions 9, 12, Caraga, and Caraga have actually reduced, no? For example, Region 9 from 37.7 to 32.7, Region 12 from 38.1 to 28.2, and Caraga from 39.7 to 30.5. While nag-reduce ilang poverty, relatively taas paghihapon ni siya. So among all the regions in the country, naapaghihapon sila sa medyo taas-taas na level in terms of poverty. As far as BARM is concerned, if you look at BARM, no, ang ilang base mubo. So kung mubo imong base, dili siya lisod pasakon ang imong GRDP. So nisaka ang GRDP sa BARM, no, on account of its industry, no, sector. Pero taas gihapon ang poverty. So it means na the growth is not really that inclusive. Meaning on an average level, nisaka siya. But if you look at it, siguro province-wide, dili siya inclusive. So muna ang among tumong, no? Muna ang atong tumong to make our growth or development inclusive. When we say inclusive, nga tanan makatagamtam sa benepisyo aning economic growth, and that is really our intent. It's not just development, but inclusive development and sustainable development.
Salamat, RD Popop. Daghan kay questions to niya, no? But what we'll do is we'll just parang structure this so that we can take turns. So the next set of questions are for Asakyo. Asek, that question, can you refresh this, Aubrey? It's the questions about the Mindanao River Basin Project, saka yung budget daw po ng MinDA. So basahin ko na lang po, although it will come up in the screen. Asek Montenegro, what is the latest on the Mindanao River Basin Project, which impacts several Mindanao regions, particularly BARM and Region 12, no? So kumusta daw po yun? And then, ano daw po ang national budget ng MinDA next year, no? Given na end of term na po si President Duterte. Asakyo?
Thank you, Max. Well, Mindanao River Basin has been continues to be a major focus undertaking being supported by MinDA. And in fact, of course, because 8 out of 18 river basins in the Philippines are in Mindanao. Represented with the largest one, the Mindanao River Basin, and for which a master plan is already providing specific strategies and list of projects being implemented, although many of these still have to be pursued with the Department of Public Works. And of course, in partnership with the Bangsamoro Ministry of Public Works, considering that the Mindanao River Basin traverses both BARM and non-BARM areas. And the peculiarity to that is that national government would not be able to put forward projects within BARM because it is left within the BARM jurisdiction to allocate funds and implement such projects. And this is where we need to find the synergy of two different regions and autonomous jurisdictions in terms of implementing projects. What we're happy to note is that among those that are expected to be implemented had been allocated with budget already is the Ambal Simuay River Basin project, which is very much contributory to improving the river basin setup within the Mindanao River Basin area. And so with our continuing push for projects within the Agusan River Basin, the Davao River Basin, and the Northern Mindanao, the Bukidnon and Cagayan de Oro River Basin stretch. Considering the need to put up a priority by the DPWH in terms of flood control and several other projects in this area. So this remains to be a major focus and hopefully can be carried, adopted in the incoming administration in terms of priorities also being seen at the national level. How much budget MinDA is getting? Where we're only averaging between 170, 180 million a year in terms of budget. Of course, almost all government agencies had their budget slashed because of the redirection of allocation to fight pandemic or fight COVID. So we're also looking at somewhere only within pending deliberation at Senate next week of the budget of only around 180 million pesos. Thank you, Max.
Thank you, Asek. I'd like to flash a question which seems to concern both MinDA and NEDA po. No? So yung next slide po yata ang nakalagay ay, this is a question from Cotabato, what kind of coordination, not that one please, yung coordination question. What kind of coordination exists among NEDA, MinDA, and BARM through BPDA and relevant BARM planning offices? I think that's the third slide po, to the person controlling po the PowerPoint. The third slide. So meron daw po bang coordination na nag-exist among NEDA, MinDA, and BARM?
May I answer first, Mags?
Yes,
in terms
go
of
ahead,
coordination with BARM at a broader policy level, the Chief Minister of BARM sits as member of the MinDA board. And therefore is able to contribute in a discussion and in terms of policy making for specific advocacies and proposals in Mindanao. But on a very specific collaboration in terms of sector, MinDA pursues a framework of cooperation that we have firmed up and signed with the BARM Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries last year for the implementation of very specific agriculture-related and fisheries projects within BARM. We're also in discussions every now and then with the BARM Ministry of Energy, along with the Department of Energy and NEDA, for the formulation of the Bangsamoro Energy Plan to be carved out from an existing Mindanao Energy Plan. And the DOE had acceded to the request of MinDA for such Bangsamoro Energy Plan to be separately formulated, dedicated to the peculiarities in understanding the context of the Bangsamoro areas, particularly in the island provinces of Basilan, Sulu, and Tawi-Tawi, which are differently situated compared to the Lanao del Sur and Maguindanao within the mainland Mindanao part. And we're also moving into later on firming up, but even without that yet, we're already collaborating closely with the Ministry of Trade and Tourism and BARM insofar as activities related to barter trade, activities related to interaction within BMP-AGA, and first of that undertaking that was successfully and productively carried out was the last week's trade mission of BARM and Tawi-Tawi to Sabah.
Thank you, Yusek. RD pop-up, RD Cariño, please.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Similar to the response of Asekyo, we actually have RDCOM, Mindanao Area Committee. This is really the aggregation of all the regional development councils, for example, in Mindanao. So while there is no RDC in BARM, there's a different version of the RDC in BARM. And every quarter na ay meeting ang RDCs, and the RDC equivalent of BARM, no, that's every quarter to discuss common concerns. Like for example, infra and other social concerns, and we actually discuss agenda items that would actually impact sa tanan mga regions sa Mindanao. So there is that platform. And of course, magkita gihapon ang mga RDCs sa MinDA board. And even the RDCs, gakita gihapon siya sa SPDA board. So there are actually different forum or platforms nga magkita ang mga RDCs, magkita ang equivalent sa RDC sa BARM.
Salamat kaayo on the response to the question in platform. Na I slide, but I need our secretariat to refresh the presentation. There's a slide that covered questions related to the islands. No? Gisugda naman ninyo ganina Asakyo, ato na lang padayunon. And the questions are from Arlene Sevilla and Memen, and there's another person who raised concerns. No? So isa-isahon ko na lang. Tatlong ano po ito. Ayan, medyo maliit, pero basahin ko na lang po. No? So sabi po ni Arlene, majority of the municipalities in the Basulta provinces do not have safe potable water, which results to health issues and concerns, coupled with no access to electricity for those in far-flung and outskirts barangays. No? Tanong niya, MinDA, but I think, siyempre, pwede rin sumagot ang NEDA dito. May timetable daw po ba to ensure the provision of these basic necessities? Si Memen Gatmayta naman ng NP, sabi niya, Tawi-Tawi is growing faster economically compared to Sulu. What can be done by government to support or assist the development of Sulu? And finally, there's a third question. You mentioned that there are only 30% of paved roads in rural areas in Mindanao for agri activities. Nahalo ito. Sorry po, this is supposed to be another question. But yan, it's out there. Bakit daw, unahin na lang po muna natin siguro, Asek, yung first two. Naligaw ang tanong na to. Yung first two na lang po, yung pang-island.
By the way, Ms. Mags, there's actually a
Yes,
question ganina nga sayo about akatong unemployment. Iyang concern is, ngano ko sa report, ni naog na ang unemployment when the perception is taas. Okay, so maybe I'd like to go back to that later after.
We will do that po. Yes po, we'll do that po. Pero can you help us na lang muna appreciate these first two questions? Sahi kining islands man good, kiri makalimtan ba? So let's prioritize them now, no? So these two questions concerning Sulu and the other islands in Basulta po.
Thank you, Max.
Yes po.
Yes. Well, the island provinces really are taking the driver's seat in terms of focus by advocacy of MinDA in terms of leveraging with development partners for funding. Kasi, well, we all understand national government can no longer implement projects within the Bangsamoro areas, and therefore may have limitations in terms of penetrating our island provinces. Our BARM also is definitely putting together very specific projects along the 5 provinces of BARM, including the island provinces. So what we do is to complement with what we can tap from our development partners. So an example of this that I have shared earlier was a 1 megawatt or 1.6 megawatt solar-powered hybridized with diesel and battery in Sibuto and Sitangkay. Nationally, we have around 98% rural electrification or energization rate. In Mindanao, we have about 80% electrification rate. But when we go down to BARM, it only has around less than 50% or somewhere between 40% electrification rate. And we go down further to the island provinces. You only have 24/7 electricity in the capital towns. When you go to the Firipiri and when you go to Tawi-Tawi, which are island municipalities and therefore only powered by what is available coming from the Napo or spag diesel, there's not much opportunity to expand the economy, much less to value-add agriculture, much less to have potable water supply because there's no electricity available. So the first approach to addressing all of this is making electricity available to power all of the economic activities, aside from just lighting, but also to power water system that can be made viable. Because in these areas, there may not be viability for for instance, in Tawi-Tawi, for underground water. So we may have to rely on rainwater harvest or water desalination, which is part of those that are being studied now as adjunct project to the Tawi-Tawi RETS project that is being implemented under funding from EU. And to complete the entire chain of electricity and water system as a package of replicable project that we hope be implemented in similarly situated areas of Basulta later on. But then again, we'd like to look at not just development partners, meaning to say grant, kasi grant, hindi palaging may grant, may gift. We have to look at packaging this where there is viability for private sector to come in and invest. Because at the end of the day, if we wanted this to be sustainable, this has to have a commercial dimension. This has to expand rather than purely built on a grant, on a free services that may not see at the end of the day the viability and sustainability. So that's the approach we'd like to see. Banking on where we can target the value adding of what specific commodities we have in Basulta area and complement and support this with the availability of electricity and water systems. So at this point, we have yet to complete that entire business case for Tawi-Tawi and move towards proposing that to several other areas in Basilan and Sulu later.
Thank you po, Azek. RD Bopop, do you want to speak to those two or hindi na muna?
Just very briefly.
Yes po, go ahead po.
Ms. Mags, the NEDA actually commissioned the preparation of the Philippine Water Supply and Sanitation Master Plan. And when this master plan was crafted, all the regions, including the BARM, now were consulted. And actually, this is the basis now for the design, conceptualization, and implementation of water supply and sanitation related programs and projects. And in fact, there have been several discussions on this master plan. I'm sure that there are programs and projects for the Basulta areas under this master plan.
Thank you, RD. The next question is, I think, yung nakita nyo kanina sa chat box po, RD, no? Yung sa pakigdait, Secretariat, no? Yung question po ay, just wondering po, ever since the pandemic started, ang daming businesses na nag-close, and yet it was reported na bumaba ang unemployment rate. Ano daw po yung basis, and can you elaborate po? I think this is from your presentation. Director RD Popop. Yes.
Thank you so much for your question, no? And actually, this is something that we take very seriously, no? The monitoring of the effects, the impacts of COVID to the economy of the regions. Now, I'll speak more clearly about Region 10 kasi I'm more familiar with Region 10. For example, Ms. Mags, no? So every quarter naatay labor force survey. Kara quarter gud na siya because gusto nato makita, no, ang dagan sa atong employment. So the labor force survey is done by the Philippine Statistics Authority every quarter. So last year atong April, grabe gyud kaaysa na, no, ang pag kunhod sa atong employment level ug pagsaka sa atong unemployment. No, it's because nagsira man gyud ang atong economy. But then since it is, no, ni sakapod og balik ang atong employment level. Tinuod nga naay mga nagsara nga mga establishments. But you know, for example, in the case of Region 10, in 2019 there are over 37,000 establishments operating in Region 10, and I think right now naami abot sa 44,000. Among ga-track, Ms. Mags, no, almost every week actually ang among pag-track, pila ang nagsira permanently, pila ang nagsira temporarily, pila ang nag-implement o retrenchment or reduction of workers, pila ang nag-implement of alternative work arrangements. So for example, ang nag-permanently closed around 0.36% ra, nag-temporarily closed around 2.08%. No, so all in all, ang affected nga establishments, I'm speaking about Region 10, is around 16.5%. Tinuod na ay nagsira. Pero naapoy mga establishments na nag-repurpose. Bisan pag naay mga nagsira nga mga establishments, naay mga establishments nga nag-abri. Ngano masulti man ako na. We are tracking, no, diba, business registrations sa DTI. And there are new business registrations. Wala lang sila nagre-register. Na ay nagre-register, but no naapoy mga new business registered. Gitrack pod namo ang mga nag-register sa SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission. Gitan-aw namo ang nag-renew, gitan-aw pod namo ang mga bag-o gyud nga nag-invest. We also look at the Board of Investments. Of course, ikumparar nimo ni siya sa record prior to the pandemic, mas taas gyud lugar ang investments nato before the pandemic. But this is the truth. Naa gihapoy mga investments nga nangabot. We even track no kana laging sa BOI. And these new businesses, we also track pila ang ilang employment na na-generate. And ang lisod lang karon i-track kung how many of those displaced in terms of work were the ones absorbed by these new businesses. If we're tracking this in Region 10, I'm sure all the rest of the regions in Mindanao are doing it as well. And I'm pretty sure that there are also new investments in these other areas. Ang isa lang lugar ka-advantage sa Region 10 is very diversified ang among economic activity. And most of our economic activities are what you considered essential. That's why when we discuss economic recovery, isa sa intervention nga among gusto mahitabo is really repurposing. No, we have to improve the agility sa atong mga affected nga mga establishments para sila would still remain relevant during the pandemic.
RD, na ay related nga question nga giapas namo. I'm sure in your explanation basig na touch na nimo gamay, but this is I think very specific to hotels and businesses. Pero baka pwede ka rin magdagdag dito kasi power question din siya, no?
Okay, I will respond na lang, Max. I think makita man nato, no? So for example, tinuod ang mga tourism-related establishments no nagsira gid sila, most of them nagsira. But many of them were also mobilized as COVID isolation facilities. So bisan pag wala sila nagdawat og mga tourist, gimobilize sila sa mga local government units to become COVID isolation facilities. So nagpadayon gihapon ang ilang mga operations, although at scale down, no? Scale down nga level. And if you look at ang atong power consumption, yes, some tourism related establishments nanaog ang ilang consumption, but hey, misaka ang consumption sa mga households. Tungod kay ang delivery sa basic services like education online man. And daghan pud ang nag-work from home, no? And for example, here in Region 10, ang mga opisina wa man gid nagsara, although scale down ang operations. Now, in this new normal, nagbag-o ang paradigm in terms of delivery of mga services. It has gone online. And so therefore, mutong nagsaka pod ang consumption. Pero si Asekyo siguro ang mas makadugang sa akong tubag. But that was our analysis, Ms. Mags, dinhi sa Region 10.
Thank you, RD. Asek?
Yes, actually the same analysis of the explanation as to why we have gone back to pre-COVID levels and even higher than the pre-COVID levels. We were only averaging 1,900 megawatts in 2019. Today we're hitting 2,000 megawatts daily demand in Mindanao. Now let's all remember, perhaps not so much explained by DOE and the NEDA, for instance, 90% of the profile of load users in Mindanao are households. And so as we transition to a new normal, well, almost everything else is done at home in terms of schooling, work from home. The increased utilization of household consumption definitely is creating this dent. But kini ako ang i-emphasize lang, on a technical perspective, this is not good. Why? Because a household is supposed to be just averaging at a certain point as it is being served by an electric cooperative. But now nga nisaka ang gamit sa household over the industries, for instance, it is affecting it is causing fluctuations in our entire system. Pareha lang ni siya nga kung magtukod ka og dakong tindahan, yung the three-phase transformer to be connected. Pero kung balay lang, directly connected na ka sa poste. It's the same story as kung magtusok ka sa imong aircon, dili nimo na i-direct tusok sa imong outlet, mubuto ang imong aircon. You have to have a transformer, or you have to have a repeater. Mo na ang nahitabo karon. That's why this is causing many on and off load fluctuations in many areas in Mindanao because of the line constraints because of this transition from increased household consumption.
Asek, salamat. There's I noted a power question. Ako na lang itong iapasa, and I hope you can comment on this very briefly. Ito yata yung tanong po ni Kaloy Bautista. Sabi po niya, people in islands ulit, no? Bangsamoro continue to experience inadequate and unstable power, no? Which impacts on their economic development. What are the plans to address this, no? Baka nabanggit yun na kanina, paki-briefly share na lang po. Yung second question po.
Thank you, Max. Definitely, as we've looked at it, power is a critical precursory ingredient to attracting economic activities in the island provinces, because availability of electricity at a cost competitive or affordable rates, for instance, would be able to attract expansion of economic activities or agricultural areas. We have island provinces that are agriculturally productive. Basilan is a major rubber producing. Pero tanong, naabay processing ginahimo in Basilan? Or ang rubber kaplam export to China, export to Malaysia, just like what North Cotabato and Zamboanga Sibugay are doing with their exports on rubber kaplams. Second, fish harvest. Some of the fish harvest in Basilan end up all the way to Leyte. And at some point, mas mahal pa ang per bloke of ice than the per kilo of isda in Basilan, because wala may ice facility, wala cold chain storage, for instance, or logistics, because wala electricity available. Now, in the case of Basilan, the prospects and prognosis are a lot better than Sulu and Tawi-Tawi because it's proximate to Zamboanga. Ang kinahulat na lang actually nga na ay big power plant matukod sa Zamboanga, because in fact karon as we speak, si Zamboanga City problemado pagyapon sa electricity. But if Zamboanga power supply is improved with a new power plant, for instance, then a connection via submarine to Basilan is already made, will be made viable. But for Sulu and Tawi-Tawi, they have to be complemented with all other technologies. Otherwise, we will be relying 100% on expensive diesel. It is expensive, yet our consumers in Tawi-Tawi and Sulu are paying almost the same with us here in Davao. Why? Because they are subsidized. The challenge and the debate right now is that ERC and DOE and NEDA are moving towards the discussion of reducing and eliminating the universal charge. So kung mahitabo na siya, which we strongly oppose, meaning to say reflective of true cost na of technology ang electricity sa Tawi-Tawi and Sulu and Basilan, for instance, because they are no longer be subsidized. So that's going to be a detriment, a big detriment to our opportunity to see progress happening in the island provinces.
Okay. Asakyo and RD Popov, mag-ingon na lang yun ko ha, na daghan pa kayo questions na nakaline up. No? So marami pa pong mga katanungan na nasa pipeline, but unfortunately, medyo pressed for time na tayo. So we'd like to request two things po. First, I'd like to share two questions that I think are very important because they refer to indigenous peoples. No? So those two will be our last questions for the day. Not that. But then the second thing nga po ay I would like to request sana na pwede po ba ASEC Montenegro and RD Cariño i-submit namin sa inyo yung mga questions na nasa pipeline pero hindi namin na-post, at kung pwede po if you can get your responses so we can share them to the participants as part of the proceedings. No? So yun yung dalawa na request ko po sa inyo. Okay lang po ba? Okay, so they both said yes. So because of that, ang atin pong last two questions, and may nagsabi no na although maraming Cebuano in the room, pero mayroon ding mga hindi nakakaintindi ng Cebuano, so mag-Filipino na lang ako. No? So paano niyo na-consider ang planning, lalo na sa usaping economic development, no? Sa ancestral domain ng mga katutubo sa Mindanao at sa BARM? Ano ang papel ng NCIP at MIPA ng BARM sa planning, no? Dahil meron silang ADS-DPP. Meron ba kayong kopya ng mga ADS-DPP ng mga IP ng Mindanao? Sinusugan ito ng question ng Nonviolent Peace Force, no? Related to ADS-DPP. How are these factored into the overall economic development picture of Mindanao? Are you also looking into whether IP communities are developing or not? ASEC and RD?
I'd like to take, unahan na lang ako kaya naghuna pa man si Asio. Ako na lang ang muna. Okay.
Sige.
For example, in Region 10, I think there are 28 CADTs. Pero amo gyud ning gi-monitor. Dili tanang CADTs na anay ADS-DPP. That's why we strongly urge ang NCIT to already accelerate ang formulation aning ADS-DPP, because really to us ADS-DPP is very important and should be taken into consideration when the local government units and the region mag-prepare sa development plan. For example, we're really pushing that the ADS-DPP be considered in the preparation of the CDPs or the comprehensive development plans of the local government units. But most importantly, the ADS-DPP should be considered in the CLUPs. So in Region 10, I know, Ms. Max, I'm sorry, no, mas daghan kay kog matubag for Region 10. For Region 10, we're tracking the number of CADTs that have already developed their ADS-DPPs. We're also tracking how many of whether these ADS-DPPs have been considered in the PDPFPs, in the CDPs, and the CLUPs of our local government units, because it's very important for us nga magka-interface ang ADS-DPP with the CDP and the CLUP. Now, really for us, very important ang ADS-DPP, and in fact, that's why ang ADS-DPP also figures in the Regional Development Plan of Region 10. Now, whether the question, are you looking into whether IT communities are developing or not? In Region 10, we have a platform, a web-based platform called Ipalamdag, and the Ipalamdag is a platform for us to determine the status of the implementation of programs and projects. So in Region 10, I'll speak about Region 10. For example, in Region 10, I can very well tell you how many programs and projects are implemented in the CADT areas, CADT areas in Region 10. Why? Because we wanted to make sure nga kaning programs and projects na agad siya free, prior, and informed consent before ni siya na-implement. Also, while ang PSA naa sila'y data on poverty, pero ang level of disaggregation ana is regional, provincial, and highly urbanized city. So, dili makita sa PSA nga data ang poverty level at the barangay level, Pero adunay NHTS, National Household Targeting System, ang DSWD, And then nag-update na sila. So kana siya mo'y basis sa among pagtan-aw kung ang poverty in the barangays have actually improved. So in Region 10, we're tracking that. Kay daghan man kay sanan programs and projects gi-implement. For example, in Region 10, a total of over 7,000 programs and projects are enrolled in the Ipalamdag. Although it does not represent the entire universe of PPAs that are implemented in the region, but at least it's a very big sample. So gili-li na mo pila ani ang naa sa mga CADT areas. And then we're also trying to check whether the barangays in these CADT areas actually nag-improve ang ilang poverty level. But we're still waiting for the latest NHTS survey. We have the data for 2017, 2016, but we're waiting for the latest data to check if the poverty areas, especially in the poverty-stricken areas, especially in the CADTs, have improved. So yeah, those are our efforts. Sa ikaw na, Asikyo.
Thank you, Ardy Popo. Well, the pursuit of development in Mindanao has always been espoused by MinDA in the lens of course, the ADS-DPP, for instance. We always subscribe to the proposition that any development activity should not be invasive or would later on promote conflict in an area. On a personal note, I have assisted an investment many years ago with an executive from Singapore coming down to Bukidnon to witness the signing, and only to get frustrated because during the moment that the agreement had to be signed, the parties have disagreed among themselves and have resulted to the project not proceeding. But at the end of the day, an important realization to that is, had the project proceeded, for instance, it would have caused conflict among the local communities. So at the end of the day, it's really looking at putting premium on what the local communities, in this case, indigenous communities, wanting to have, wanting to propose, and being part of the entire development process, rather than just passive recipients of whatever economic windfalls being identified in the entire project design. And this has gone through that same approach in many other projects that we have assisted, such as power development projects, hydropower projects that have to go through 3 years of first prior informed consent and NCIP processes that will have to take into account all these peculiarities. And that is reflective of how we are approaching several other efforts to support government and private sector investments in these areas in Mindanao.
Last na lang, Ma'am Mags, because I think there's a question if whether the other NEDA regional offices are also tracking kaning ADS DPP and also the interface of the ADS DPP with the CLUP, CDPs, and PDPFPs. They're doing that, Ma'am Mags. Dili lang ko kahibalo sa ilang status. And then I'm sure they're also tracking ang mga program project implementation in the CATI areas. And you know why? Because the Mindanao regions have actually adopted our system, ang ipalamdag. And I'm sure they're doing that as well.
Thank you, RD. Alam nyo, RD and Sec, ang dami pa talagang questions. So ang gagawin na lang po natin, this is also an invitation to those na nagtaas ng kamay kanina. Gaya po ng nakalagay sa house rules, wala po tayong puwang para mag-deliver kayo ng question directly beyond the chat box. No? So please maximize the chat box. If you have other questions na ngayon nyo lang naisip, idagdag nyo kasi we will get them to ASEC Yo and RD Pop-Up para po masagot po nila, and we will make sure those questions, their answers are then shared with you, no? Kasi talagang this conversation about the economy and infrastructure cannot be confined to only a morning, no? So this is all we have, no? So ganito na lang po muna, before I say thank you sa ating dalawang napakahusay na panelists, allow me just to share a few key points, no? Nagsimula kasi ito dun sa tanong ni Conference Chair Kaloy Manlupig, no, nga sa hisgutanan sa ekonomiya ug infrastruktura mikusog bagyod ang Mindanao, no? So has Mindanao's economic and infrastructure situation become stronger, no? And we seem to be getting a mix of answers, no? Pick up natin, sabi ni Asek Yo, yes, sa panahon bago pa ng pandemya, na ay improvement sa GRDP growth rate sa mga regions sa Mindanao, no? Nalampasan pa gani nato ang national average nato 2018. Yung shinare ni RD Cariño, kung i-recon natin yun as annual average growth rate, at least 3 of the Mindanao's regions exceeded the country's annual average growth rate for the period of 2017 to 2019. So meron, no? And kahit na nagkaroon ng pandemya, bisan sa panahon sa pandemya, nag-positive gihapon ang Mindanao agriculture in terms of gross value added. And very clearly, under our Mindanaoan president, may mga efforts, no, para mas responsive ang budget to Mindanao, no? Ang data na pinakita ni Asecchio kanina, in 2019, our share was 11.5%. And then nung 2020, 11.7%. And I think for 2021, 17% na ang atong share, no? Pero ang sabi nga, we remain a land of plenty and at the same time, a land of poverty, no? Sabi ni RD Cariño, may mga pagbago naman, no, sa poverty incidence. Sa pipila ka region sa Mindanao, bumaba naman talaga. Pero overall, taas gihapon ang poverty incidence. Ibig sabihin, hindi natin na-overcome yung incidence na yun, ano? At medyo jarring yung or reality check yung shinare ni Asek yun, no? Na the poorest of the poor are the farmers and the fisher folk. So kung sabto na to ba, no? Ang mga taong nagtatrabaho para may makain tayo ay naghihirap. Ang mga nagapakaon sa ato kulang o basi wala ajoy makaon, no? Isa din yatang lumabas ay dili automatic na kung taga Mindanao ang president mag-improve ang situation, no? Because the policy remains the same. Pinakita ni RD Pop-Up sa atin kung ano yung paraan from the regional budgeting, paano yan naapektuhan, no, ng paggawa ng GAA at iba pang factors, no? So sabi nga ni RD, may mga challenges to ensuring regional equity, no? Realidad pa rin yun. Yung pinakita ni RD na infrastructure flagship projects or IFP, Luzon and NCR together account for 78.2% of the IFPs. Arang-arang ang Mindanao compare sa Visayas, kaya ang Visayas 8.7%, pero ang Mindanao 13.1%. Gamay ra gihapon siguro na tandi sa 78.2%, no? Parang kung simplihon ta and ilakbit nato ni sa hisutanan sa paghimo sa election agenda, basi gyud dili automatic na kung mabag-o tungod sa individual nga liderato kay murag ang problema ang atong sistema, no? Daghan pa gyud tay buhaton, no? Daghan pa gyud tay buhaton para mahimong tinuod nga kusog ang Mindanao, no? So let us once again express gratitude to Director Mylah Faye Aurora B. Cariño, RD Popop, and Assistant Secretary Romeo Montenegro ASECIO for helping us stay abreast, no, of the developments concerning the economy and infrastructure situation of Mindanao. We will take this opportunity to have a photo with RD Popop and ASECIO. Please turn your camera on. And we will ask the Secretariat to take conference photos for the third day. Aubrey, please.
Okay, please turn on your camera, and there are 3 pages for all Zoom participants. So please make sure to smile all throughout my 3 cues because hindi po natin alam kung anong page tayo lumapag. So on my cue, for the first batch, smile 1, 2, 3. For the second batch, on my cue, 1, 2, 3. And for the last batch, on my cue, 1, 2, 3. Maraming salamat po.
Salamat, Aubrey. At dahil hindi natin alam kung anong batch tayo, nakangiti tayo the whole time, which is just as well, no? Because tinatapos na natin yung live streaming portion ng ating event. Thank you again sa ating dalawang mahusay na panelists. Unta makausap kami og invite sa inyong duha, no, in the future, no? And we are calling on everyone to join us again tomorrow for the 4th day, no, of the Kusog Mindanaw conference. We will be tackling the exciting themes of climate change, environment, and health. Another napapanahon na set of themes. Salamat.